All right, so we have our reamer now from 4D Reamer Rentals, and we have our headspace gauge there. So now we need to determine how much we're gonna do a pre-drill, because we are gonna pre-drill this rather than just bore this completely out. All right, so these are the drill bits that I've used. They're just Amazon drill bits, but they've really drilled this stainless steel really nicely. And 7/16, that should work out perfectly for what we're trying to do here with a case head like a 6GT, or in this case 22 GT. So what I need to do is get all this stuff out of the way here, because we're not going to be using this for a little while. Okay, so we're just going to get that out of our way, and we need to get our drill chuck set up. Get that to where you guys can see it. And I just use a basic cheap Amazon drill chuck. It doesn't really matter. You're just drilling a hole. You're gonna ream this out perfectly concentric anyway. And then we kind of have to determine how far we're gonna drill. So with most of these cartridges, I drilled them twice. And that's because if we think about this, I want our bushing here to contact our lands and grooves in our barrel basically at all times. So I don't want this thing, if I pre-drill this longer than this area is here, then I'm not gonna have that. So if I pull out a caliper, so what I'm gonna do, change this to inches here, and you don't have to be exact, but we're gonna drill about 1 inch right now. And then we're gonna go ream all that out, check it, and then we're gonna re-drill. This is the way that I've done it. It's worked out well for me. It's not the way that you necessarily have to. So we will get our drill bit chucked up here. Okay, we'll get our drill bit chucked up. Let's see, we wanna drill 1 inch, so let's start at 1.5 on our dial here. And that's really about it. Let's get our speed set. We'll get our lathe turned on. Okay, we're gonna use a pretty fast speed. So just making sure everything's set, nothing crazy is gonna happen here. And we are gonna bore this out. So we're gonna put some lube on here, and we're gonna get going here. So we'll get that started, locked into place. Start drilling. So again, we're gonna drill in about 1 inch. Okay, we're gonna back out, clean off the chips. Get those tossed out of the way. Get some more lubricant in there. And on our drill bit. And we're just gonna keep going there. We're pretty much at 2.5 there. Okay, so clean off all of our chips here. Again, we just got rid of all this material here without having to basically abuse our reamer to get us to that point. So we're just gonna clean most of these big chips up, and then I'm gonna vacuum this up and clean up this area and get this chamber cleaned out, because now we're ready to start doing some reaming. Now, some people like to go ahead and clean this up with a boring bar. I've never done that. I've never had any issues. So not saying it's bad, it's probably good, but I've never done that with this situation here. So let me go ahead and get this situation cleaned up here, and then we'll be back. All right, I ran into a little snag with this reamer. I'll show you guys later. But anyway, so we've got our piloted reamer here and our floating reamer holder, and we're gonna go ahead and start reaming this chamber. Now, I've got this lathe set at 90 RPM, so it's quite slow, and I went ahead and cleaned all this mess up. So what we're gonna do, feed in nice and slow. At first, we can feed in a little bit more aggressively because we're not gonna be taking much material out. But as we get going, we're gonna feed in really slow and make sure that we slowly ream this chamber. Again, this is a ton of passes here. That's just part of it. So first we'll get our reamer fed in. Okay, we got it touching, and now we're just gonna go ahead and turn the lathe on. And we're just gonna start reaming. Again, at first, we're taking nice slow passes here. We're just barely taking any material. You kind of let it go for the feels at first, because it depends on what cartridge you're reaming. Again, we pre-bored this, so we're not taking out much material anyway. Again, I am not a gunsmith. I'm doing this in my garage. And this is like the 6th barrel I've done. Okay, so we've reamed a good portion there. We're gonna shut our lathe off. We're gonna back out. And as you can see now, we have a little bit of our chamber ream. Now I'll show you what mechanism I do to get these chips out. All right, so I've done a handful of passes now. Again, I use air in the end of the muzzle to blow out the chips. Then I use a small, basically a small bore brush, a really undersized bore brush that I wrap paper towel around to clean this out. I also will intermittently use a shop vac if needed. I also blow this off, the reamer there off, with the compressed air in the shop here. So, all right, I've done a handful of reaming now, and we'll just have an idea of where we're at. We can tell we're not anywhere near the right depth. We need to be about 135 thousandths for total depth, or total stick out of our go gauge. So, right, we're at 707. So again, we're not anywhere close. That's not an official measurement or anything like that, but 707 minus 135, right? We need to go in what? Or sorry, 600,000, something like that. So we're gonna go ahead and take another couple more passes, and then we'll come back. All right, so I've got most of the reaming done on this chamber. I usually like to do these in 2 parts just so you don't get in a hurry, but I almost screwed up with my pre-drill. I pre-drilled 1 inch, and that was real close to being too far. So, I don't know. I guess worst case scenario, we could probably cut this tenon again. We could probably cut this shoulder back a little bit. If we look at our comparison, we have a lot more space that we could have unthreaded if we really needed it. So if we really mess this up and we put the pre-drill too far, we could have managed, but it was scaring me there for a little while. But anyway, this caliper is set to 0, so we're about 33 thousandths from our correct depth with our go gauge. So what I'll do now is we will come back tomorrow, and I'll pull out the action, and we'll use some feeler gauges to make sure that this is perfect. All right, so was anybody yelling on the camera at the screen whenever I was cutting the pre-bore there? We have our headspace gauge now within 10 thou of where it needs to be as far as stick out goes. And we have not cleaned up all of that where we've pre-drilled. So I pre-drilled this too deep. I believe where I went wrong was this chamber had already been cut, so it had that little bit of excess chamber already on it. So I didn't calculate that in our calculation. So we actually ended up drilling in like almost 1.25 inches versus where I wanted to drill in about 1 inch. Now, the good thing is here, we are not totally screwed. I don't have to redo this whole tenon. So we have about 175 thousandths that is not threaded, but on Arrow's tenon print, they list a maximum unthreaded distance of 255. So we can go ahead and extend this like way out to there and fix this tenon length without having to recut these threads. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to go ahead and ream this chamber enough to clean up our pre-bore in there, which is hopefully like only another 20 or 30 to 50 thousandths hopefully. And then we're gonna fix this tenon length. We're gonna have to basically reset this tenon length to, I believe it's 890. So I'm gonna ream this out again, another 40 or 50 thousandths hopefully, and then we'll have to move this shoulder back like 40 or 50 thousandths and then cut this down 40 or 50 thousandths. I'll show that whenever we're ready. Alrighty, so what we're looking at here is how close we were to having this be perfect actually, because our headspace gauge sticks out right about, maybe, this isn't a perfect measurement, but maybe 1116. So 116, where we want 135. So obviously this chamber is reamed too deep. We just did that on purpose. So if we're looking at 116, it needs to be 135. So we need to go ahead and lengthen this tenon. What is that, like about 20 thousandths? I don't know. My phone is recording this and I don't have a calculator. So basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna push the shoulder back a little bit and we're gonna cut the tenon down in length a little bit so we can get our headspace correct. So that's what we're gonna do next. All right, so my plan here is to shave about 10 thousandths off the end using our cross slide here. And then we're gonna shave 10,000 off of the shoulder there. So that's what we're gonna do. And I don't have any fancy DROs or anything like that. So that's how we're gonna roll here. So I need to get this to touch, okay, and then lock our carriage there. And off that. And make sure that we're not crazy with all our settings of our lathe because we're gonna auto feed this. So no, I need our compound or cross slide there to go the other way. So again, so we're gonna go ahead and take 10 thou off. Touch should be right about 0. Let's do this pretty carefully here. That should be, what, 2 thou? There's about 4 thou. Because my plan right now is to get this go gauge a little bit shallow still, to shallow it out, so we still need to make maybe one more plunge to get our headspace perfect. That's really going to be my game plan here, so I'm not trying to set it up perfect right now. We'll clean out the chamber and we will check and we will see. Now I should be able to measure how much we just took off because this was 890 exactly before. So let's see how long our tenon length is now. We're pretty close. We're maybe within 1 thou of taking 10 off. So we should be darn close. Let's make sure that our chamber's cleaned out here. Just make sure there's no chips in there to mess with our gauge. We already have our chamfer on there, so it shouldn't be catching or anything. And let's see if we're about 135. That's what we're shooting for here. Again, this is just a caliper. This is just getting a rough measurement here. Okay, we're pretty darn close, right? 137, 136, so it's pretty close. Now I need to get this tenon length correct again, I need to take 10 thou off this shoulder too. So we're gonna switch tools. We are gonna use that tool there. And we are going to use the same mechanism here, but I need to make sure that this tool is square. So I should be able to square this up here. We just cut that face, so it should be square. So let's go ahead and square things up using that tool there. We'll just square this tool post up. Now, if we're lucky, I should be able to feed this in 10 thousandths from touch, and we should be darn close. Okay, so we're pretty well touching for diameter. Let's back out ever so slightly. Let's turn the lathe on. That should be pretty well touched. Let's lock everything in place. Okay, so obviously locking that, we got a little bit of a cut. So I'm gonna go maybe 8 thou. Clean this off and let's see how we did here. See how close we are. Okay, looks like we need about 4 more thou. So we'll just fire up our lathe again. We should be able to just go 4 thou here. Okay, so there's 4 thou. Now I know this video is probably really long, but the good thing is we did show sometimes you screw stuff up, and the good thing about a lathe is you can usually fix it. Okay, now on this caliper, I'm getting 890, maybe 891, but you can't measure these tenons with a caliper. It's not a precise enough measurement. So what I'm gonna do is get this out of the way, and we're gonna pull out some better tools and we're gonna measure this. All right, so with the proper tooling now, we want that to land on that 15, right? So we are between the 15 and the 16 mark, so we are within basically a half thou of our correct tenon length. Okay, now, what would be great is if we just put this on here and the headspace is perfect. But we are now gonna do our first test for headspace now that we have all of our screw ups hopefully fixed here. What I am gonna do though is I'm gonna clean this shoulder up just a little bit with some light sandpaper before we do that, because I don't want to be messing with sandpaper and things like that after. Okay, so clean all this up now. And like I said, we're gonna do our first real headspace check here. Clean all this area up here. See if we fixed our mistake. Our headspace hopefully is a little short still, meaning that our bolt won't close, because I'd like to set this up nice and perfect by using a another plunge of our reamer there, but obviously we're gonna find that out. Okay, we're gonna make sure that our chamber is cleaned out. We don't want any chips in there messing up our process there. Okay. Action screwed on. And we'll try our go gauge here. Perfect. Can't close on our go gauge, so awesome. So I can go ahead now, and what we'll do, this is the way that I like to do it, so we're really close. Now what we'll do is use a feeler gauge right in here to see how much further we have to go. So I only slightly messed this up. It wasn't near as big a problem as I had thought it was going to be there for a minute. So let me get my feeler gauges out and let's see how many more thousandths we need to go. We're probably like within a couple of thousandths here. So let's see, let's get some of these real thin ones out here. So here's three thousandths. Let's try that one, and we're just using that in between the action and the, okay, so 3 thousandths will just barely slide in there. Let's see if 4 will. Okay, so 4 will. Let's see if 5. No, so we need to come in 4 thou. Now we're gonna have a little bit of crush. So realistically, we're probably gonna wanna come in maybe 5 or 6 thou. I think on this pass, we will come in 5 thou, and we'll just see how that turns out. Okay, so we'll get this out of the way. Got to get our lathe back to 90 RPMs, which is going to be 1B, and we'll test it. Okay, we're back at 90. Get this thing out of the way, and we will make sure, and like I said, we're going to do we're going to do 5 thou. That should get us kind of close. Okay, and we're going to take 5 thou. Okay, so there's 5 thou. Almost nothing, right? And let me get all this cleaned up, and then we'll see where we're at. All right, so we got this all cleaned out. Our depth should be about correct. We're going to screw the action back on and see if it will close on our go gauge. It might, but if it does, it's probably going to be a little tight. We're probably going to do another pass, but we'll see here. Okay, so we'll get it close, get our go gauge in. Okay, now we're going to turn our lathe just a little bit here so you guys can see what's going on here. But we can close it. All right, so that's good. Now let's see what our no-go gauge looks like. And right, so no chance of closing on that no-go gauge. Now we need about 2/1000 of room in between because we're going to get a little bit of crush when we do these threads. So I'm going to go get a piece of Scotch tape and put it on the back of this go gauge. And if it'll close, we're going to be good to go. All right, so if we were chambering this for my seconds, we would go ahead and stop here because we don't care about any crush because we're not going to get any. But this barrel is going to be torqued down. So I have a piece of Scotch tape on the back of our go gauge just to make sure that we're not going to be under headspace, right? And we could still close that. It's stiff, right? So we could probably go another thou, but realistically, we're never going to shoot factory ammo out of this anyway. And again, we were able to close that on that Scotch tape. It was just a little stiff. So we are not going to be really under minimum headspace. If we get a thou or 1/1000 of crush, we should be fine. Again, we take that tape off. We've got our barrel snug down. And again, we close with no resistance, right? That's the same resistance that you get when you just close this action anyway, because there's a little bit of cock on close. So we should be in good shape when it comes to headspace. Now, the last thing that I'm going to do here is I cut a little bit of a taper to lead into the chamber before we fixed our tenon link, before we fixed our major error there. And I need to cut it just a little deeper now because we did trim a little bit off. Now, if we look at our maximum permissible area of unthreaded area, we really still only have maybe like 180 thou, where they said we could have 255, so we've got no problem there. Our tenon link's perfect, our headspace is perfect. We're just gonna cut a little chamfer, kind of like this one here. This is a takeoff that I had. We're gonna cut just a little chamfer there, and then we're gonna run a little sandpaper in the bore, just to make sure that our bore is not too smooth. So let me set up my compound here. And we're gonna cut that with a small boring bar. Let's see. And like I said, what I'll do is I'll just match this other taper here. So we'll bring this in, put it up against the face there. And again, this isn't a critical, like a critical feature. It just helps with feeding. So we just want to make sure that we're close to the same angle and depth. Okay. So we're going to end up with about a 40-degree taper there, which should be just fine. I forget what the print says. You guys have my phone, which has the tenon print on it, so I can't look at it right now. But 40 degrees should be just fine. And again, we're just gonna take a small taper just to make sure that we have good feeding. So turn that lathe on. Pop our tool in. Okay, that looks good to me. So it's not a huge taper, it's just a little bit of a taper to help kind of get our rounds feeding into the bore. Now the last thing I'm gonna do is we will clean out the chamber one last time, and then we're gonna take some sandpaper and make sure that everything is nice and smooth here. So again, we just have like a little small taper there, kind of trying to match this one here. Again, it hasn't been critical on the Solus. It's fed pretty good. And I'm guessing with a 22 cal, it's gonna find that hole quite easy. So we're gonna take some fine grit sandpaper here. Okay, so I've got some 320 grit here. We're gonna cover our ways up, and we're just gonna make sure that all of this is nice and smooth. Okay, and we're actually gonna spin the lathe in the opposite direction. So we're gonna make sure there's no burr there. We're gonna make sure that the end of this is nice and smooth. Again, no burr on either one of these, especially on that lead up to the barrel. Lead up to the chamber there. Okay, put this lathe off. All right, no burr, everything looks nice and smooth. And now we're gonna take, what I use is just a little piece of, it's actually a piece of graphite, so you know it's not gonna scratch anything. And we're just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna wrap this piece of 320 around this graphite. And I'm just gonna hit the inside of the chamber just to rough it up a little bit, because we don't want too smooth a finish. We want this to kind of grip the chamber walls a little bit. I'm also gonna put just a little bit of our grease on there, just so we're not doing this dry. Again, we're gonna turn our lathe the opposite direction. We're just gonna make sure that we hit that and smooth all that out. Just that chamber a little bit, just give it a little bit of texture where it's awful clean from that reamer. Okay, and that is pretty much it. We're gonna do one final clean out here. All right, so my lighting here where my barrel vise is isn't very good, but I wanna show you guys now after getting the barrel torqued down. So we've got our go gauge. Right, slips in no problem. And we've got our no-go gauge. Right, no chance of closing that bolt. So we've got our headspace set up the way that we should. We got our barrel torqued on now, and now we're ready to go ahead and load. Obviously, I'm gonna throw up some videos of the chamber work there, where you can see the only real lines in the chamber are from the sandpaper we roughed up, because as we get up to the neck there, we've got just absolutely smooth reaming. So anyway, I showed you guys the whole process here. You guys saw my screw up. Really, the video took a while to edit and make. It's a long video, but the process actually didn't take that long. I maybe spent close to 2 hours, maybe 2.5 if you include all the cleanup and everything of the rifle here. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you have any questions, comment down below. And now we got to figure out if this free barrel to me shoots. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you next time.